Welcome back to JP's Budget Collecting and our weekly look back at the hot comics from 6 months ago. This week we're looking back at the hot comics from September 23rd, 2022, and I'm recording this on March 24th, 2023. As always, I give you those dates so you know when this information is actually relevant because the market is always moving and changing. Books are going up, books are going down, as you will definitely see from this list. As always, we're looking back at the CBSI Hot Top 10 and the Comic Tom Key Collector Hottest Trending Comics of the Week. We'll see how long that lasts, given at least another 6 months, given the way those lists have started coming out recently. But for now, we're still doing them. So what are we doing here is we are looking back at the books that were hot 6 months ago, trying to see what factors made them hot, why people were chasing them in the market, and what you would do, whether you would be better off or not if you'd been patient or if they were worth chasing at the time. As anybody who's been following this list for any length of time knows that the vast majority of the time you are patient. You are better off being patient, although occasionally we have some exceptions. This week we have 19 books to talk about, so let's see what we can learn. First up, we have Clive Barker's Hellraiser, number 1 from 1989. First Pinhead on the cover of a comic. So this was hitting the list because we had a new Pinhead movie coming. So he wasn't actually in the book. It's why he's on the cover and not in the book, because he wasn't actually in the book until issue 2. But we had the trailer drop for the Hulu movie. Back then, raw copies were going for $25. 9.8 was averaging, going for $700. Now raw copies are $10 to $25, which is only kind of an I'll be back, but 9.8s are down to $150 to $225. So a huge drop there. So this book is definitely a dumpster fire on that 9.8 side. Is $700 down to basically an average of 2. So big drop on that side of things. Next, we have Rogues Gallery number 1. This was optioned by Don Cheadle's production company for a TV show, so that caused a huge spike in sales. Raw copies were going for $4 though only, so it didn't cause a spike in price, which is really what should happen if you've been watching the show for any length of time with option news. It's fine to go buy it. I wouldn't pay premium for it. Interestingly enough, this one's actually stayed up, is actually up and kind of worth it. It's $5 to $20. Most of the sales are $5 to $10, but there are a few sales in that $10 to $20 range. And so, yeah, this has been worth it so far. I won't really call it straight cash because it's still peaking out at $20 at the most. So, but yeah, a book that has definitely been worth it to this point. Next, we have Eternus number 1, the metal 1 in 100 variant. Back then, this Virgin variant was going for $200 for a raw copy, and which was double ratio. So that usually means it's going to drop back a little bit. But now this metal cover has had no sales in the last 3 months that I could find on eBay. No recent purchases. There may be other outlets where it has sold, but it has not sold on eBay. Listings start at $200, so really, yeah, but people have not been willing to pay that. So I put this as a trap just because obviously it's hard to get rid of. You're going to have to take a loss of some sort to even get anybody interested in buying it because there has not been a lot of interest here. All right, with that, we're going to move on to our next cover, which is Vanish number 1, the Ryan Stegman Spawn 1 homage. This was an exclusive to Donny Cates Substack that you could only get through that. Back then, raw versions of this were going for $60 to $80. Now it's a $40 to $50 book. So turned into just barely a trap, but really depends on how good the series was, depends on how well a book like this typically does. In this case, it has backed up some, enough to fall into my trap category, the 20, 30, 40% drop, but it definitely just barely kind of in that range. Next, another cover. We have Usagi Yojimbo, number 31, the Peach Momoko 125 sketch variant. I said this back then, I'll say it again. I think some of her best work has been with Usagi. I think she does a great job drawing this particular character and is more consistent with it than a lot of their other characters. Back then, this 1 in 25 was going for $50 plus, but now it is a $10 to $15 book. Actually, there's basically a sale for $10, and then the other sales are parts of sets with other covers from this issue that are going for like $30 for like 3 covers, but one of those other covers goes for like $20. So yeah, this is definitely a $10 to $15 book at the most, and definitely a dumpster fire if you were chasing this particular Usagi cover. Even though, like I said, I like some of her Usagi covers more than most of her other covers. All right, next we have 2 covers of the same book. We'll talk about them individually. First up, we have Harley Quinn 30th Anniversary Special, number 1, the Adam Hughes 1 in 100 foil. Back then, this 1 in 100 was going for 175 to 200. Less than double, but on a 1 in 100, that doesn't matter as much. Raw copies now, though, are only 65 to 85. 9.8 only 150. So yeah, this is another dumpster fire. This is a book that's dropped more than 50% and fallen way, way back. This was one, I didn't particularly like this cover to begin with, but yeah, this is one that definitely has not held. It's not a huge cover that has held up for sure. Next, we have Harley Quinn 30th Anniversary Special number 1, the Art Germ 1 in 50 foil. This cover I like quite a bit more actually, and it was only doing 70 to 80 on so less than double ratio back then. Which should have indicated it's definitely going to back up, and it has. Usually less than double means it ends up less than ratio. This is now a $30 to $50 book. 9.8 has a pretty good range on it, 1 to 200. For the most part, we're looking at, a trap here, as this book has definitely fallen back. All right, still 2 more covers to talk about. We have Deceased, War of the Undead Gods, number 2, this Sun Kumanaki variant. This 1 in 50 was only going for ratio at the time, 50 to 60 bucks at the time of release. So that typically means it's going to be, drop way back. It's going to be like half ratio or something. This is not the case with this book. This is actually a $50 to $90 book with one sale all the way up to $120. The vast majority of these sales, though, are in the $75, $80 range, with just a few sales higher and lower. 9.8, only one sale went from 100. So that shows you that, there's not... maybe a little high. That 9.8 was probably a deal, but also a little high on the raw copies on this. But this is up and worth it. Kind of throwing out that 120. It is a single outlier. But yeah, you're talking 70, 80 on what was a $50, $60 book. That's definitely up and worth it. Borderline, you could say straight cash. Not sure that I love this cover, but apparently people did. So next we have Edge of the Spider-Verse, number 3, the In-Hyuk Lee limited edition store variant. This was pictured as the Virgin. There's also a trade dress. Back then, sets of the 2 were going for $125 plus. Now sets go for $30 to $40 raw. There were no 9.8 sales of either version. Trade dress will sell on its own 10 to 20. Virgin will sell 20 to 30. So another kind of dumpster fire. Yeah, this book has dropped way, way back. Night Spider's been a decent character, but I will admit this end of the Spider-Verse event has not been all that great. So really, even though she's been a decent character, not much to stand out about that whole event. Next, we have a couple of Comic Buzz related books. We have Gargoyles number 1 from 1995, and this is hitting the list because Dynamite announced that they were bringing the series back as a comic, so we're going to get more Gargoyles. We have already gotten more Gargoyles. That book has started coming out already. Back then, it caused raw copies of this book to jump up to 115. 9.8 was doing 300. Now it's a $5 to $60 book for raw. 9.8, 200. So that 9.8 is a trap, but that raw copies, if people were paying over 100, that's definitely a dumpster fire because most of the sales are like 20 to 30 with just an occasional sale that's going higher in that $40, $50, $60 range for a really nice copy. But generally, you can do better than that. So yeah, this is a book that definitely has fallen way back, even though the series is now coming out. Next, we have Spawn Batman number 1 from 1994. This was hitting the list because both they were reprinting it, but also a new one-shot crossover with Spawn and Batman was coming out, which it has come and gone since then. Back then, though, raw copies were going for $12, 9.8, 180. Now it's a $1 to $15 book for raw copy, 9.8, 150. So put this as a down and I'll be back. You can do a little better. The book wasn't that high to begin with. And yeah, if you just kind of waited, you can get back to where it's always been. It's a pretty cheap book. Next, we have Swamp Thing number 37. This is our first kind of DC movie related book. The first appearance of Constantine. And this is based on the rumors and news, supposedly, that HBO had canceled the Justice League Dark movie, but they were going to bring Keanu back for a John Constantine movie, which I don't really think of Keanu's character really. I realize he's supposed to be Constantine, but I don't really think of that character as Constantine. But anyway, so we were going to get a sequel to that movie. Back then, raw copies were going for $330 on average, according to to Tom's list. 9.8 or 9.6 was going for $680. Now it's a $75 to $300 book for a raw copy. So, peak it out, still around that range, but definitely down a little bit. 9.6, $600 to $700. So again, most of the sales are a little bit down, but pretty close to the same range. 9.8, $1,600 to $2,000. So definitely a book that's got a lot of value, a character that a lot of people want. I put this as an alt down and I'll be back. You could argue with me that maybe I should have put it as a steady and I'll be back. This could be one of those where I just forgot to look it up, that the raw values at the time was maybe his average of 330 was maybe a little high, and I maybe should have looked and gotten a better distribution on the raw data, in which case it might have been steady and I'll be back. But we'll leave it as down for now. But yeah, that is definitely a great book, and a book that, long term is probably street cash. So next we have Amazing Spider-Man number 503 on the list for the second week in a row. The first appearance of Tess Black, the daughter of Loki. Last week we were talking about lots of sales, but it was only going for $5, which made it actually current prices kind of an up and worth it, or up in street cash. Well, now the second week that it was on the list, it was up to a $15 to $20 book, and now it is a $5 to $20 book. So kind of a down, and I'll be back. So the flip side, that second week people were talking about it, it got a little too high. You can definitely do a little bit better now than you could back then. With that, we still have, 5-6 books left? 6 books, all in the MCU related things. And we're going to start this 6-book run with a pretty good book, Tomb of Dracula, number 1 from 1972. Back then, raw copies, this is one of those where I did look it up. They claimed averages of $750, but I looked it up back then, and raw copies were like $50 to $700. There was not a $750 sale, so clearly they were doing the average of everything, which makes no sense. There was a 9.8 sale that went for $10,800 back then. Now it's a $50 to $400 book, raw copy, depending on the condition. 9.8, $52 to $6,000. So that's a trap. This book has come crashing back down, and I will say, like back then, there was consistent sales on 9.8. It wasn't one sale of $8,000 to $10,000. It was going in that range quite a bit, and it's been creeping back down. The last several sales are all $52 to $6,000. So this book is definitely backed up. Maybe a book that peaked a little later in the hype. But this was all based on the rumor that I forgot to mention Anthony Starr, the actor who plays Homelander, was going to be Dracula in the MCU. We'll see if that actually comes to fruition. But for now, if you bought this book during some of that hype, it has not been street cash, although long term you'll probably make it back if you're patient. Next, we have Bloodstone number 1. The first appearance of Elsa Bloodstone. We knew we were getting Werewolf by Night, and that she was rumored to be a part of it back then, so we didn't know for sure at that point. We have gotten that special. She was a part of it. She was a really good part of it. Back then, raw copies were going for $200. 9.8 was up to $725. She's appeared. The book crashes. That's the way it works in the MCU. After the show comes and goes, it crashes. Doesn't matter the character anymore, hardly. Raw copies now are $90 to $150, 9.8, $4 to $450. So this has definitely turned into a trap also, which has become the pattern for MCU related stuff. Once they appear, even if they're going to appear again, the books come crashing back down. Next, we have Free Comic Book Day from 2022, Avengers X-Men Eternals Judgment Day number 1. This has the first appearance of Bloodline, Blade's daughter. Back then, this Free Comic Book Day book was going for $4, 9.8 for $70. Now it's a $1 to $10 book, 9.8, $50 to $100. And this was hitting the list, and people have been speculating on this because there's rumors that this character might appear in the Blade movie. But yeah, so that's why there's been some interest. But this book is a lot of these out here. But it's been steady and worth it. It's kind of stayed in this range, which is pretty low for a key, but because there's so many out there, but pretty good for a Free Comic Book Day book. So there you go. Next, we have Marvel Superheroes Secret Wars number 10. This includes the battle between Doom and the Beyonder, where Doom kills the Beyonder. Back then, raw copies were going for $25, 9.8, $225, and this was all based on the news that we were getting Secret Wars as a movie. So that's why people were chasing this. Raw copies 10 to 40, 9.8, 175 to 225 now. So this book has kind of also been pretty steady and worth it. covering that same range. 9.8s are maybe a little I'll be back side versus worth it, but the raw are definitely on the worth it side of this. Great series. We'll see how closely the movie follows anything that came from the series. I kind of doubt that, but my guess is it's a completely different plot with maybe just a few plot points from the original storyline. Next, we get Incredible Hulk, number 256, also on the list for the second week in a row. This is the first appearance of Sabra, a character rumored for Captain America 4. I don't guess rumored, I think confirmed at this point. Back then, raw copies were going for 60, which, hang on, I gotta get where I can see, which is basically right where they were, kind of right in the middle of where they were last week when we talked about when I was on the list for the first week. 9.6 was up to 375. At that point, a reminder, the previous week when we talked about 9.8s were hitting 900, or hit a high of 900. Now, raw copy will cost you 5 to 75. 9.8 will only cost you 275 to 400. So yeah, this book is turned into a trap. So yeah, you can get 9.8s for less than that 9.6 value back then. So definitely a trap. We'll see if this character makes any kind of impact when we get Captain America 4. Next, another book related to Captain America. Sam Wilson, Captain America, number 3, the first appearance of Joaquin Torres. Back then, raw copies were going for $20 to $40, 9.8, $150 to $200. Now, raw copies going for $10 to $30. No recent 9.8 sales. So this book is kind of an I'll be back. It's backed up a little bit. We know this is going to be the new Falcon. We know he's going to appear. But not a lot of hype with this book. This book has stayed fairly reasonable for a character that we haven't gotten yet. Maybe people have we haven't been, but there hasn't been a lot of talk about this movie yet either. So even though we know we're getting him, there hasn't been much hype related around it. We did get the actor in Falcon and the Winter Soldier in the show, so we know who it's going to be, but we'll see what happens. So that is this week's list. We had a couple of up books that were generally books that were pretty low value to begin with, but have moved up a little bit. We have a lot of down stuff, several dumpster fires. A pretty typical week, really, and we're talking about, because, you know, even books like Tomb of Dracula have been dropping over the last year plus as we've moved away from the COVID hype. So I want to thank you guys for watching, and we will catch you next time.